We're going to go through the entire Old Testament by the time we're done this morning, and by the time we're done, you'll be able to go through the entire Old Testament in about 3 minutes. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. This is a participatory session. That's way too big of a word in the morning after no sleep at all. This means you get to participate with hand signals and giving me feedback all the way through. So if I ask you the question, how many books are in the Bible, you will all say together, okay, that's really wimpy. We're videotaping this, okay? How many books in the Bible?
66.
Much better, thank you. I need that kind of volume all the way through. I'm going to give you hand signals to do. Everybody do this real quick. Okay, that's not bad, thank you. Would you keep doing that? Because like I said, they're videotaping and Ken's going to watch. No, not now. When I tell you, man. All right, so we're going to do that kind of stuff all the way through. And we're going to start, I'm going to lay this stage out like the map of the Holy Land. Now, I don't know what direction this really is, but this morning, this is north. Okay, that means this is south, this is, and this is, all right, you guys are good. In the Old Testament, there are three basic countries that we have to worry about. Over here in the east is Babylon. In the north here is Assyria. And in the south is Egypt. And of course, right in the middle here is Israel and the Holy Land. Three major bodies of water. There is and we're going to make the podium kind of like the Dead Sea. Down there is the Red Sea, because that's Egypt, right? And over here, that would be we're going to call it the Med Sea, all right? So we got the Med Sea, the Red Sea, and the Dead Sea. Up here we've got Assyria. Down there we've got Egypt. Over here we've got, and in the middle we got Israel. Good. So that's the geography we're going to use this morning. And so we're going to trace right from the very beginning all the way through the Old Testament, and you're going to know it by the end of the hour. So, how many books are in the Bible?
66.
How many in the Old Testament? 39. And in the New Testament, then there are 27. Now, it's going to get a little silly through here. There are 12 chronological books in the Bible. Everybody do this. Okay, come on. Thank you. You all look as silly as I do. That's good. We have 10 fingers, 2 earlobes. There are 12 chronological books in the Old Testament. Chronological means the order of time. Well done. Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Ezra, Nehemiah. Those 12 books give us the history or the chronology of the entire Old Testament. So all you really need to do to understand the Old Testament is read those 12 books, at least for the timeline. Now, for instance, if I was to say David wrote most of the Psalms, and the story of David is primarily in what book? Does anybody know? 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel, the book of Psalms basically fits on the timeline into 2 Samuel. Excellent. If I was to tell you that Job lived at the same time as Abraham, what book of the chronology would the book of Job fit into? Genesis. So now you kind of get it. Let's do that together. There are how many chronological books? 12. Everybody do this. There are how many chronological books? 12 chronological books. They are Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Ezra, Nehemiah. In the Jewish Bible, 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings are actually 1, 2, 3, and 4 Kings. So this makes it pretty simple. Saul is basically in 1 Samuel, or the Jewish Bible, 1 Kings. David is 2 Samuel, or 2 Kings. Solomon is 3 Kings, and all the other kingdoms in the divided kingdom are in 4 Kings, or what we call 2 Kings. And then Ezra and Nehemiah give us round out the rest of the Old Testament. All right, so how many books in the Bible? We're going to do this a lot. We go back and repeat so you learn it. How many books in the Bible?
66.
How many in the Old Testament? How many in the New Testament? There are how many chronological books? They are 12. They are Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Everything begins in the book of Genesis. Well done. Since this is answers in Genesis. Yeah. Everything begins in the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 1. Everybody do this is where you get to do this again. All right, good. Genesis 1 is creation. All right? Genesis chapter 2 is special events of creation. I did this at a camp one time, and the little kids thought I said effects. So that's where this comes from. This is the special effects of creation, but it's not. Special events of creation. So do the special effects. Come on. All right, track with me. Special events of creation. Genesis chapter 3, you grab the fruit, the temptation and fall of Adam and Eve, right? Everybody say that. The temptation and fall of Adam and Eve. Chapter 4, the first murder is Cain and Abel. Chapter 5 is genealogies. What's a genealogy? It's a story of your family tree. Boy, these guys in the front row are really good. Maybe you guys in the back row could kind of yell those answers out too. That'd be really good. Good job. Family tree, it's your genealogy, right? So chapter 5 is genealogies. 6, 7, and 8 do this. Everybody, no, let's go start low and go up. Noah and the flood. Chapter 9, waters go down. Noah after the flood. Chapter 10, genealogies. Now 5 and 10. There's a lot of genealogies in chapter 11, but chapter 11 is mostly about the Tower of Babel. Chapter 12 is
the call of Abraham.
Now, as we all know, God is a base. And so when you do that, when he spoke to Moses, it was a very deep voice, so you have to do that.
The call of Abraham.
All right, good. That could be a stretch for some of you girls, sorry. All right. What direction is this? Yeah, what direction is this? Okay, good. What sea is this? Med Sea, the Dead Sea, and the Red Sea. What nation's down there? The Egypt. Up here is Syria. Over there is, and in the middle is. How many books in the Bible? How many in the Old Testament? How many in the New Testament? How many chronological books are there? 12. They are Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Everything begins in the book of Genesis. Genesis 1 is, everybody do it. Genesis 1 is creation. Genesis 2, the special events of creation. Genesis 3, the temptation and fall of Adam and Eve. 4, Cain and Abel. Yeah, no, we're saying Cain and Abel. 5, genealogies. 6, 7, and 8, Noah and the flood. Genesis 9, Noah after the flood. 10, 11, 12, call of Abraham. All right, good job. Abraham was born in a town called Ur. Ur of the Chaldees, where the Tigris and the Euphrates flow into the Persian Gulf. Every time I'm doing this, when I pause like that, that's going to be something that you're going to say as we go through it. So Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, where the Tigris and Euphrates flow into the Persian Gulf. God came to Abraham one day and said, Abraham, go into a land, you guys are going to do these actions too, a land that I will show you. I'll make you a great and mighty nation. I'll make your name great. So Abraham packed his bags. When you get married, guys, girls, this is how men pack their bags. So Abraham packed his bags, came up around what we call the Fertile Crescent. Fertile Crescent meaning it was fertile. Thank you. It was really, really a beautiful place. They came up to a town called Haran. Now, Tim, stand up for a second. Okay, turn around. Haran was barren. I had to find one of the only people in here who has less hair than me. Thank you, Tim. I talked with him first. I asked him if it was okay if I pick on him. Anyway, Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, where the Tigris and Euphrates flowed into the Persian Gulf. God came to Abraham and said, Abraham, go into do this, land that I will show you, make great and mighty. I'll make your name great. So Abraham packed his bags, went up around the Fertile Crescent to a town called Haran, which was barren. Good. You guys are doing well. All right. 4 people went on that trip. Well, there were more than 4, but 4 main characters. And you can remember their names by the word salt. Okay, do this. I'm not going to tell you why you do that to do salt, because that would be junior high-ish, and we don't talk about those things in this event. Salt. Sarah, Abraham, Lot, and Terah. Okay, those are the 4 names. Say it with me. Sarah, Abraham, Lot, and Terah. They stayed there in Haran for 30 years till Terah died. They came down into the land, but they had a problem. Anybody remember what the problem was? Anybody know? They had some people, no? Okay, there was room for everybody. Over here, God said, I'm going to make you into a great and mighty nation. I'm going to make your name. What does that mean? I mean, he said, Abraham, look up to the stars. That's how many, count them, Abraham. You can't count them. They're innumerable. That's how many your offspring are going to be. You're going to be huge. The sand on the seashore cannot count the number of offspring you're going to have. 30 years later, Abraham's getting old. They come down into the land and they've got a problem. They've got no children yet. We're talking 80s here. I don't know about you. I don't want any kids when I'm 80. I got 2. That's enough. You ever tried to help God out in anything in your life? Well, Abraham and Sarah got together, and they tried to help God out. They knew that they were supposed to have a lot of kids. Sarah's getting old. She's getting up to be close to 90, and Abraham's older than that, and they're getting a little nervous. So Sarah says to Abraham one day, hey, I've got this handmaiden. Her name is Hagar. And what about if you slept with her and had a child with her, and that would help? And this would help God. And I'm not sure they couched it in exactly that language, but that's exactly what they did. Now, there's a problem here. What's the problem? In the Garden of Eden, what did we hear about marriage? One man, one woman. Well, I'm not sure, and honestly, one of the questions I'm going to ask somebody when I get to heaven is why Abraham was allowed to have more than one wife. It just didn't seem right to me. But he was, and many, many people did, and that was the very cultural thing to do. And mind you, this was the very cultural thing to do. If you didn't have children, you'd take one of your maidservants and have kids. Well, there's only a problem here. Hagar did have a son, and his name was Ishmael. Everybody do this, because his name starts with an I. Ishmael. Now, we're going to do this for a little while. Ishmael was not the son of promise. By son of promise, I mean the person God is going to designate to carry on the line or carry on the family through history. Ishmael was not the son of promise. What people group did Ishmael become the father of? All of the Arabs. Finally, Sarah had a son. His name was Isaac. Isaac was the son of promise. Everybody do that. Isaac was the son of promise. It's just a little teaching point for a moment. Have you ever thought about the consequences for your choices? The consequences for your decisions? No, not really what you wanted to wear when you got up this morning, but the really big ones, like, should I have sex with my boyfriend before we get married? Let me just share with you what I think about that. No. God says sex is for marriage. That's the only place. And this is a really good illustration of no matter how good you think you're helping God, they really messed up. Do you understand 4,000 years of consequences for 10 seconds of pleasure? Think about that for just a minute. 4,000 years of hatred, annihilation between two people groups because they raced ahead of God, even though God promised them everything would be fine. You ever race ahead of God? Make the wrong choice. You need to develop the biblical convictions you need to make it through life before you're faced with the situation. Don't get caught in the wrong consequence. Well, that's what happened. Hagar had a son. His name was, everybody? Ishmael. But Ishmael was not the son of promise. Finally, Sarah had a son. His name was Isaac. Isaac was the son of promise. Isaac had 2 sons. Their names were, anyone know? Jacob and Esau. Esau was not the son of promise. Jacob was the son of promise. Jacob had, here we go again, everybody, come on, 12 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter's name was Dinah. Very good. The old people will remember that show, Someone's in the Kitchen with Dinah. Okay, you 2 guys remember that. That's good. All right, good. Thank you. I'm glad you remembered it. All right. I never saw it personally, but I heard it was out there. All right, let's go back for a little bit. Abraham was born in Ur. Everybody with me? Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, where the Tigris Euphrates flow into the Persian Gulf. God came to Abraham and said, Abraham, go into a land that I will show you, making great and mighty. I'll make your name. So Abraham went up around the Fertile Crescent to a town called Haran, which was, remember the names of the people that went by the word? They were Sarah, Abraham, Lot, and Terah. They stayed there for 30 years till Terah died. Everybody try and do these with me, okay? They stayed there for 30 years till Terah died. They came down into the land, but they had a problem. They had no children. So Hagar had a son. His name was Ishmael, but Ishmael was not the son of promise. Finally, Sarah had a son. His name was Isaac. Isaac was the son of promise. Isaac had two sons. Their names were Jacob and Esau. Esau was not the son of promise. Jacob was the son of promise. Jacob had 12 sons and excellent. The second of the youngest son's name was Joseph. Brothers didn't like him very much, so they threw him in a pit, sold him into bondage, and sent him down to Egypt, where he lived for 30 years. After 30 years, there was a famine. Oh, I'm really hungry because I missed breakfast in the land. And the whole family moved down to Egypt for another 30 years. After 30 years, Joseph died. Pharaoh died. New Pharaoh hit the scene, didn't like what he saw very much, put the people into bondage for 400 years. All right? Everybody do that with me. The second youngest son's name was Joseph. Brother didn't like him very much. They threw him in a pit, sold him into bondage, and shipped him down to Egypt, where he lived for 30 years. After 30 years, there was a famine in the land. The whole family moved down for 30 years till Joseph, Pharaoh, New Pharaoh hit the scene, didn't like him, saw very much, put the people into Excellent, you're doing well. After 400 years, people cried out, God, get us out of this mess. You have to say that loud and throw your hands up in exasperation. I mean, they were sad. There was just a few people that went down 400 years later. There's 2.5 million. They're all in bondage. They got to make, it's a mess. So God called a man named Moses and told Moses to go down, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Can you do that? All right. God called a man named Moses. He said, Moses, go down, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses came down and said, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no. So God performed the 10 plagues. We call them the 10 miracles. Very cool stuff. Egypt had lots and lots of gods. Every miracle or every plague that God sent was in order to defeat one of the Egyptian gods. Totally cool. Frogs, blood in the Nile, all of it. Right up to the last one where they took the firstborn. Even Pharaoh, who was a god, could not prevent God, the true God, from taking his own son. Very cool. So finally, Pharaoh said, now, by this time you have to understand, he's beaten. He's wimped out. So you got to go, okay. So finally, Pharaoh said, okay, that's good. That's good. All right. So Moses, this isn't the same thing as packing your bags. Moses gathered the people, led them through the Red Sea, and I'm running out of space here, but up to Mount Sinai, where God gave him the 10 Commandments. Down here in the Red Sea, there was a guy who got saved later in life, and he wanted to go to Bible school. So he went to a seminary. I went to seminary, and they call it cemetery for a really good reason. The library is the deadest place on earth at a seminary. But anyway, this guy, who was a brand new Christian, didn't know anything about the Bible, hardly anything about God, but he'd just gotten saved, went to this school. He's in the library one day, and he was taking Old Testament survey, and he's reading through the Bible like they had to do, and he got to this part where Moses leads the people out of Egypt and through the Red Sea. And he gets pretty excited. And he's going, this is so cool. Wow. I can't believe God is so awesome. This is amazing. And about that time, one of his profs walked by. This was kind of a liberal school, didn't really, understand the Bible the way we did. One of his profs walked by and said, what are you reading? What are you so excited about? Well, prof, this is so cool. I'm reading how Moses gathered the people, led them through the Red Sea. It was dry land. This is really cool. And the prof said, son, profs do that at seminary. Son, don't get too excited because it was the Reed Sea. Okay? It was a part of the Red Sea, but it was just the Reed Sea. God didn't do this amazing miracle. It doesn't happen that way. It was just 6 inches of water. Okay? Don't worry about it. Students go, wow. Okay, you're the prof. How do I know? So prof goes off to the other side of the library, and this guy keeps reading. About 5 minutes later, wow! Cool! This is so awesome! Like, wow! And the prof comes back over. He said, son, what did I just tell you a few minutes ago? It's no big deal. But prof, you don't understand. God made the whole Egyptian army drown in 6 inches of water. Guys. This conference is all about telling you, if God said it, it's true. Okay? Let's get that straight this morning, because you're going to hear it for the rest of the day. If God said it in His Word, it is true. You can take it to the bank, 100% reliable. When God said, I'm taking my people through the Red Sea, He took the people through the Red Sea. The Bible says the water was up on both sides. They went across on dry land, and then kaboom, they took out the whole Egyptian army, horse, chariots, and all. It happened just like that. If God says, I'm going to let my servant Jonah spend 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of this great big fish, and then I'm going to make that great big fish swim all the way over there and puke him up on the shore, and he's going to look really bad, and then go to Nineveh and preach. And that's exactly what happened. Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish. The fish went over the place and vomited Jonah up onto the shore, gross as that may sound. If God says, look, I want you to walk around Jericho 7 times, for 7 days, and then I want you to walk... It's exactly what the Bible says. It's exactly what happened. There have been people groups mentioned in the Bible that scholars have scoffed at for years. The Hittites being one of them, one of the greatest people groups in the Old Testament. They couldn't find any hint of them anywhere until 1908. This guy named Hugo Winkler found the Hittite Empire buried in the sands. The Bible is true. If God says, I'm going to send my son, we're going to call him Jesus. He's going to live a perfectly sinless life. He's going to die for you on a cross, and I'm going to put all of the penalty of all of the sin of all of mankind upon him, and I'm going to turn my back. Then that's exactly what happened. And if God said, I'm going to create the world in 6 days, then God created the world in 6 days. Let's start taking the Bible at face value, because it's true. Amen? Let's back up just a bit. Joseph was, second youngest son's name was Joseph. Brothers didn't like him, so they threw him in a pit, sold him into bondage, sent him down to Egypt, where he lived for 30 years. After 30 years, there was a famine land. The whole family moved down for 30 years till Joseph died. Pharaoh, new leader, hit the scene, didn't like what he saw very much, put the people into bondage after 400 years, people cried out, God, get us out of this. That's not bad. God, get us out of this. Yes. Thank you. God called a man named Moses. Said, Moses, go down, tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses came down and said, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no. So God performed the 10 plagues. We call them the 10 miracles. Finally, Pharaoh was beaten. He said, okay. So Moses gathered the people, led them through the Red Sea, brought them up to Mount Sinai, where God gave him the 10 Commandments. Moses then sent 12 spies up to a town called Kadesh Barnea. I don't have a hand signal for this or a waiter. Cabbage Patch Barney doll is the best I've ever come up with. Kadesh Barnea, I'll say that for you. Kadesh Barnea sent 12 spies into the land. They're in the land. They're checking it out. The land is flowing with milk and many honeys. It's a beautiful land. They come back and report, Moses, the land is phenomenal. Look at the grapes. They're huge. But Moses, there's giants in the land. We can't do it. It'd be like if I'm up against Tim here. It's like, there's giants in the land. They will squish us like bugs. We can't do it. So they came back and gave their report. 10 said, no go, Moses. We cannot do this. 10 said, do this. No go. 2 said, let's go. Who are the 2? Joshua and Caleb. Who are the 10? They're actually listed in Scripture. We don't know because they are losers. Man, they've missed the promise. How could they miss coming through the Red Sea, getting the 10 Commandments, and then not seeing God's promise for what it was? Well, they did. The people voted. They said what? No go. So God said, because of your disobedience, you're going to wander around the wilderness for 40 years till everybody 20 years and older dies. So that's what they did. They wandered around the wilderness for 40 years till everybody 20 years and older died. And Moses finally brought them up. I'm going around the area here around almost just north of the Dead Sea, to a place called Mount Nebo. Everybody's got a knee. Everybody's got an elbow. Do that. Come on. Mount Nebo, where Moses died. New leader hit the scene, General Joshua. By the way, what book are we still in? We're still in Genesis. It's the beginning. Now we're into Joshua. General Joshua led the people through the Jordan River, do that, through the Jordan River and divided the land amongst the 12 tribes. All right, let's go back. Moses going down and said, Moses, go down and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Pharaoh said, no. So God performed the 10, not 12, plagues. We call them the 10 miracles. Finally, Pharaoh said, Moses gathered the people, brought them through the Red Sea up to Mount, where God gave him Moses sent 12, how many spies? 12 spies. They came up to Kadesh Barnea. Moses sent 12 spies into the land. They viewed the land. They came back. They voted. 2 said, let's go. 10 said, no go. The people voted. They said, no go. So God said, because of your disobedience, you're going to wander around the wilderness for 40 years till everybody 20 years and older dies. They wander around the wilderness for 40 years till everybody 20 years and older died. Moses brought the people up to Mount Nebo, where Moses, new leader, hit the scene. General, crossed the Jordan River and divide up the land amongst the... Great. After Joshua died, there were 7, this is a roller coaster, okay? 7 social, everybody do this, social, economical, and spiritual ups and downs under the judges for 400 years. Okay, you got that? 7 major cycles of ups and downs in the nation for 400 years. After 400 years, people cried out, God, give us a king. Now, this is where you get to be a little creative. You can make your own crown. Okay, so everybody make your own crown. Little girls will make it little sparkly things and, do this to make little sparklies on there. I don't know, whatever you want. God, give us a king. Okay? Now, there's a lot of debate. Was this the right thing to do? Was this the wrong thing to do? It ended up being a very difficult time because the first king's name was Saul. Of course, we know that Saul started well, didn't end very well. Saul really had a hard time. Of course, you know that Saul was the tallest person in the kingdom. Anybody else see a problem with that? Oh, come on, it's a joke. You don't. Yeah. Okay. Short people unite. All right, fine. You can remember the kings by the number of syllables in their name. The first king was Saul, the second king was David, and the third king was Solomon. All right? So basically, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, Saul, David, and Solomon. There were 3 kings under the United Kingdom, and again, with me, they were Saul, David, and Solomon. After Solomon died, the kingdom was divided. Now, this is where it gets tricky. There were 10 tribes in the north, 2 tribes in the south. The name of the north is Israel. The name of the south is Judah. The capital of the north is Samaria. The capital of the south is Jerusalem. There were 19 kings in the north before they got annihilated. There were 20 kings in the south. There were no good kings in the north. There were 8 good kings in the south. Let me go through that again for you. After Joshua died, there were 7, everybody, social, economical, and spiritual ups and downs under the judges for 400 years. After 400 years, people cried, God, give us a king. There were 3 kings of the United Kingdom. They were Saul, David, and Solomon. After Solomon died, the kingdom was divided. There were how many tribes in the north? 10. And how many in the south? 2. The name of the north is Israel. The name of the south is Judah. The capital of the north is Samaria. The capital of the south is... How many kings in the north? 19. How many in the south? 20. How many good kings? 0. How many good kings? 8. Wow, well done. I'm only going to ask you to remember 2 dates. In 722 BC, King Shalmaneser V. I've got a whole long story, which we don't have time to do today, a whole long story about how you can remember Shalmaneser V. Just kind of go with the flow. Shalmaneser. I don't know. You'll have to figure that out. Shalmaneser V, from up here in Assyria, came down, took the 10 tribes captive, dispersed them, and we've never heard of them since. All right, do that with me. Took the 10 tribes captive and dispersed them, and we've never heard of them since. There were 3 ways people would take care of their enemies during those days. Way number 1, of course, was to come down, take everybody captive, and then send them all through your kingdom. Okay? So they couldn't mount a rebellion against you, and they'd eventually intermarry and disperse, and that's what the Assyrians did. The Babylonians took a slightly different approach. They came in and took all the best and the brightest, the noblemen, and took them back to Babylon so they could integrate them into their culture there, and the poor people back here wouldn't have enough leadership in order to mount a rebellion. The third way is just kill them all, and that happened a lot. But unfortunately, it didn't happen to God's people. So, King Shalmaneser V from up here in Assyria comes down and takes the 10 tribes captives and disperses them, and we've never heard of them since. Good. In 605 BC, over here in Babylon, which king? Nebuchadnezzar. 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar comes and takes the 2 tribes captive, takes them back to Babylon for 70 years. After 70 years, 3 guys, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel. I want to name my 3rd son Zerubbabel. It's probably a good thing I'm not going to have a 3rd son, I don't think, unless the Lord does something pretty cool. Zerubbabel. That's kind of one of those weird names. Everybody say that. Zerubbabel. All right, 3 guys, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel, bring 50,000 Jews back to Jerusalem. I'm going to do this over here because of the podium. Back to Jerusalem, where they rebuild the walls. Who was in charge of that? Nehemiah. How many days? No, a really short time. 52 days to rebuild the walls. Pretty cool. That's a great story in Nehemiah. Anyway, Nehemiah is in charge of rebuilding the walls. They rebuilt their homes. They rebuilt the temple. That was Zerubbabel's job. And they reestablished communication with God. That was Ezra's job. And so the 3 of them performed this reunification of the kingdom, as it were, by rebuilding say it with me, rebuilding the walls, rebuilding their homes, rebuilding the temple, and reestablishing communication with God. After that, there were 400 years of silence, after which a man came crying in the wilderness, "Behold, the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world." That's the whole Old Testament, right there, in a nutshell. That's the whole history of the Old Testament. We're going to do it a couple of times, but before I do that, there's really something cool about this. Assyria comes down and takes the 10 tribes captive and disperses them, and we've never heard of them since. That's really interesting to me. In Revelation, I read that God is going to call 12,000 men from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And there'll be 144,000 witnesses during the tribulation that will wander around the earth preaching the gospel. Well, I know where these 2 tribes come from, but whereabouts are the 10? They don't even know what tribe they're from. Who does? God does. I think that's really cool. We serve the omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, omnipresent, he's everywhere, God. Can we say amen to that? Amen. All right, are you ready? Well, I'll tell you what, let's redo that last bit, and then we're going to put the whole thing together. After Solomon died, let's do it this way. After the judges, people cried out, "God, give us there were 3 kings of the United Kingdom. They were Saul, David, and Solomon. After Solomon died, the kingdom was divided. There were how many tribes in the north? 10 in the north and 2 in the south. The name of the north is Israel. The name of the south is Judah. The capital of the north is Samaria. The capital of the south is how many kings in the north? How many kings in the south? How many good kings in the north? How many good kings in the south? In what year? 722 BC, King Shalmaneser V from Assyria comes down and takes the 10 tribes captive and disperses them, and we've never heard of them since. In what year? 605 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon comes and takes the 2 tribes captive, takes them back to Babylon for 70 years. After 70 years, 3 guys come back, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel. They bring how many Jews? 50,000 Jews back to Jerusalem, where they rebuild the walls, rebuild their homes, rebuild the temple, and reestablish communication with God. If you want to read just a wonderful story, read the story of Ezra. Man, the way he calls the people back to God. I mean, they find the writings, they find the temple documents, and they bring them all out back into the light after 70 years of being in a dungy basement kind of thing. Broken down building. Wow, it's awesome. All right. How many books in the Bible? All right, I'll tell you what, let's stop for a minute. We're going to do this quickly. I want to do this all together, and I want you to really try and do the hand motions, because here's the deal. If you practice this a few times, you can actually teach this. It is not that hard. And it's a lot of fun, especially with junior high kids that, are afraid to read the Old Testament. How many of you have read through the entire Old Testament? Wow, that's awesome. Congratulations. For those of you who haven't, it's not that scary anymore, is it? There's just 12 chronological books. You just fit them all in. Okay, you ready? Nice and with oomph. How many books in the Bible?
66.
Thank you. How many in the Old Testament? 39. How many in the New Testament? 27. Everything. There are how many chronological books in the Old Testament? 12. They are Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Ezra, Nehemiah. Everything begins in the book of Genesis. Genesis 1 is creation. Genesis 2, the special events of creation. Genesis 3, the temptation and fall of Adam and Eve. Genesis 4, Cain and Abel. Genesis 5, genealogies. Genesis 6, 7, and 8, Noah and the flood. Genesis 9, after the flood. Genesis 10, genealogies. 11, 12,
Call of Abraham.
Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, where the Tigris and Euphrates flow into the Persian Gulf. God came to Abraham and said, Abraham, go into a land that I will show you, make a great mighty nation. I'll make your name great. So Abraham went up around the Fertile Crescent to a town called Haran, which was, I hate doing that. You remember the names of the people that went by the word? They were Sarah, Abraham, Lot, and Terah. They stayed there for 30 years till Terah died. They came down into the land, but they had no. So Hagar had a son. His name was, but Ishmael was not the son of promise. Finally, Sarah had a son. His name was Isaac. Isaac was the son of promise. Isaac had, their names were Jacob and Esau. Esau was not the son of promise. Jacob was the son of promise. Jacob had 12 sons, and second youngest son's name was Joseph. Brothers didn't like him very much, so they threw him in a pit, sold him into bondage, sent him down to Egypt, where he lived for 30 years. After 30 years, there was a famine in the land. The whole family moved down for 30 years till Pharaoh, Joseph, knew Pharaoh had the scene didn't like him so very much, put the people into, bondage for 400 years. After 400 years, people cried out, God, get us out of this. God called a man named Moses, said, Moses, go down to Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses came down and said, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no. So God performed the 10 plagues. We call them the 10 miracles. Finally, Pharaoh said, so Moses gathered the people, brought them through up to Mount, where God gave him Moses brought the people up to Kadesh Barnea, where he sent 12 spies into the land. They came back. Two said, let's go. 10 said, no. People voted. They said, no, go. So God says, because of your disobedience, you're going to wander around for 40 years till everybody 20 years and older dies. So they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years till everybody 20 years old died. Moses brought the people up to Mount Nebo, where Moses died. New leader hit the scene. General Joshua led the people through the Jordan River and divided the land up amongst the 12 tribes. After Joshua died, there were 7 social, economical, and spiritual ups and downs under the. By the way, some great stories in Judges. How many have read Judges? My favorite judge, Ehud. I'm left-handed. Anybody else left-handed in here? Yes. They're going to make a movie out of this story someday. Okay? I think Arnold will play Ehud. I think so. Or maybe, I don't know. If they make a movie out of Samson and Delilah, maybe Arnold will play Samson. I don't know, but don't cut my hair. It's like, I think there's some great movie material in the book of Judges. I don't know about you. I think so. Anyway, 7, how many? Let's go. 7 social, economical, and spiritual ups and downs under the Judges for 400 years. After 400 years, people cried out, God, give us a king. There were 3 kings in the United Kingdom. They were Saul, David, and Solomon. After Solomon died, the kingdom was divided. How many tribes in the north? How many in the south? Name of the north? Name of the south? Capital of the north? Capital of the south? How many kings? How many kings? How many good kings? How many good kings? In what year? 722 BC. King Shalmaneser V from Assyria comes down and takes the 10 tribes captive and disperses them, and we've never heard of them since. In what year? King from comes and takes the 2 tribes captive, takes them back to 70 years. After 70 years, 3 guys, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Zerubbabel, bring 50,000 Jews back to Jerusalem, where they rebuild the walls, rebuild their homes, reestablish. That's the whole Old Testament. Give yourselves a hand. Well done. isn't the Old Testament, it's not that daunting anymore, is it? 12 chronological books. You read those 12, you've got the entire history of the Old Testament, right up to 400 BC. Now, there's some generalities in that, okay? There's some genealogies in chapter 11 of Genesis as well as chapter 10. This is a broad stroke kind of walkthrough, but it helps you see the framework of the Old Testament. I want to encourage you to maybe sit down with your index and plug in where all the books would fit in the timeline. A lot of the prophets fit in 2 Kings. A lot of, let's see. How many Psalms did Moses write? One. Anyone know which one? Psalm 90. Very well. Very good, So some of Psalms fits into Genesis, some of it fits into 2 Samuel. Those are the kinds of things that make it kind of fun. Probably if you've got a Ryrie Study Bible or something like that, there's probably a timeline already in there. But it's good to do that on your own and try and figure that out. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Do you want to do it really fast? The record is 2 minutes and 19 seconds. I can't do that with this large of a group. That was with a group of about 20 kids. We had a lot of fun. 2 minutes is pretty fast. Do you want to try it one more time really fast? Just to see if you got it. All right, here we go. Who said no? You're fired. Okay. How many books in the Bible? How many in the Old Testament? How many in the New Testament? How many chronological books are there? 12. They are Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Ezra, Nehemiah. Everything begins in the book of Genesis. Genesis 1 is creation. Genesis 2, the special events of creation. Genesis 3, the temptation and fall of Adam and Eve. 4, Cain and Abel. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Noah, 9. No, after the flood. 10, 11, 12. God came to Abraham. Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees, where the Tigris Euphrates flow into the. God came to Abraham, go to a land that I will make great, mighty, make your name. So Abraham went up around to a town called, which was, remember the names of people by word? They were. Say therefore, till Terah came down to had no. Finally Hagar had a son, his name was Ishmael, but Ishmael was not the son of promise. Finally Sarah had a son, his name was Isaac, was the son of promise. Isaac had 2 sons, their names were? Esau was not the son, Jacob. Jacob had, second youngest son's name was, brothers in like Marcus threw him in a pit, sold him sent him down to where he lived for. After 30 years, the whole family moved down for 30 years till Pharaoh, Joseph, knew Pharaoh the senior like him, sorry, put the people into 4. After 400 years, people cried out, God, get us out of this. God called a man named Moses, said, Moses, go down, tell Pharaoh to. Moses came down, said, let my people go. Pharaoh said. So God performed the 10 plagues, we call them the 10 miracles. Finally, Pharaoh said, Moses gathered he didn't pack his bags. He gathered the people, led them through the Red Sea up to Mount Sinai, where God gave him the 10 commandments. Moses brought the people to Kadesh Barnea, sent 12 spies in the land. 2 said, let's go. 10 said, people voted, they said, no go. But God said, because you're disobedient, he's going to wander around the wilderness for 40 years till everybody 20 years and older dies. So they wander around the wilderness for 40 years till everybody 20 years and older dies. Moses brought people up to Mount Nebo, where Moses, new leader at the scene general, led the people through the Jordan River. Jordan, Red Sea, through the Jordan River and divided the land amongst the 12 tribes. After Joshua died, there were 7 social, economical, and spiritual ups and downs under the 4. After 400 years, people cried, God, give us a. There were 3 kings in the United Kingdom. They were. After Solomon died, the kingdom was divided. There were how many tribes in the north? How many south? Name of the north? Name of the south? The capital of the north? Capital of the south? How many kings? How many kings? How many good kings? How many good kings? In what year? 722 BC, King Shalmaneser the 5th from Assyria comes down and takes 10 tribes. And we've, in 605 BC, King comes and takes 2 tribes, takes them back to Babylon for 70 years. After 70 years, there were 3 guys. They were bring how many Jews? 50,000 Jews back to where they reestablish. Oh, good job. Give yourself a hand. All right. That's the whole Old Testament.